Culture is software. It is the most pervasive and destructive software ever written. And like all software, it runs on hardware it did not design and does not really understand. The hardware is you. The body, the nervous system, the wet and ancient machine that was already running for hundreds of thousands of years before the first myth was ever installed on it. Beneath every belief you hold, there sits a layer of firmware that no belief can reach. And the distance between those two layers, the new code on top and the old code underneath, is the source of nearly everything that aches in a modern life. Start with the part the system most needs you to forget, which is that there is a lower layer at all, and that it cannot be fully overridden. You can be argued into almost anything. That is the great vulnerability of the operating system, the soft surface where the culture writes. Opinion, identity, belief, the whole furniture of the self you take for granted, all of it is editable, and every institution that has ever wanted you knew it. Give them your childhood, and they can install a god, a flag, a market, a self-image, a list of enemies, and you will defend the installation as if it were your own soul. But there is a depth past which the editing stops working, and the editing stops working because below that depth, nothing runs on argument anymore. It runs on sensation. And sensation does not take arguments. You cannot reason a stomach out of dread. You cannot persuade a clenched jaw that it is relaxed. You cannot talk the body into believing it is safe when it is not. And you cannot talk it into believing it is at home when it knows, with an intelligence older than language, that it is not. This is what makes the body unfalsifiable. It is the one witness in the whole system that cannot be bribed and cannot be talked around. The mouth will agree to the lie to keep the peace, and the gut will tighten at the exact moment of agreement, keeping its own separate and incorruptible record. There is a second brain down there in the viscera, hundreds of millions of neurons that never learn to flatter you, wired up the long nerve to the old animal brain, reporting continuously on the true state of things underneath the official story. The shoulders carry the job you have talked yourself into loving. The chest reports the relationship the mind keeps defending. The body is the lie detector you were born with and never learned to read, because the operating system has a strong interest in you never learning to read it. So when modern life produces in you that low constant hum of wrongness, the free-floating dread, the sense that something is off that you cannot name and cannot argue yourself out of, understand what you are actually feeling. You are not malfunctioning. You are receiving an accurate report. The firmware was tuned across an immensity of time for a particular world, a world of forests and open horizons and firelight, and a face-to-face band of 50 of days shaped by the sun, and nights shaped by the dark, of bodies in motion and hands in dirt. It is now being asked to run under fluorescent light, on clock time, in isolation, sedentary, fed on soft manufactured food, lit by a screen until it cannot sleep, and it is reporting the mismatch the only way it knows how, as discomfort, as anxiety, as a homesickness for a home you have never personally seen. The firmware remembers what the mind forgot. It is homesick for a world the system paved. That homesickness is not a weakness in you. It is the last honest instrument you own. If the lower layer cannot be argued away, then the obvious question is how the upper layer ever took the machine in the first place. And the answer is the second movement of this whole story, because the system did not win by persuasion. It could not. It won by domestication. We use that word too gently. Domestication is not taming. Taming is what you do to one animal in one lifetime, gentling it by hand. Domestication is something colder and far more total. It is the reshaping of an entire lineage across generations. The slow selection, breeding after breeding, for the traits the keeper finds useful. Docility, tractability, dependence, a permanent and convenient softness. You do not tame a species into domestication. You sculpt it over centuries into a shape that can no longer remember the wild original and can no longer survive without you. And the staggering thing, the thing we flinch from looking at directly, is that we are the only animal that ran this process on itself. The same hand that turned the wolf into the lapdog and the wild aurochs into the standing milk machine turned inward and went to work on the human form. You can read the results in the bones if you know what you're looking at. The teeth got smaller, the face got lighter and flatter, the heavy brow of the wild ancestor melting away. The whole rugged architecture of a creature that had to bite and fight and endure was quietly bred down into something gentler, rounder, more childlike, more manageable. We softened our food until it built no jaw, and now the teeth crowd into a mouth too small to hold them, a small daily monument to the process, growing crooked in skulls that the wild diet would have built wide. The signature of the domesticated animal, written across every farm species on Earth, is written across us too. We are a wild thing that bred itself tame, and then forgot it had done so. Consider the grain, since the grain is where the story always gets told backward. We say, with enormous pride, that we domesticated wheat. Stand back and watch the actual transaction. A grass that could not move convinced an ape to clear whole forests on its behalf, to guard its seed through every winter, to carry it to every continent on the planet, to kneel in the dirt for it from dawn to dark, and to bind the entire shape of human time, the festivals, the calendar, the working year, to the rhythm of its sprouting. Who domesticated whom? The grain got planetary distribution and a devoted slave species, and the ape got smaller, sicker, more crowded, more anxious, and chained to a field. It was a co-domestication, and we did not get the better half of the deal. And here's the part that should put the cold finger on the back of your neck. The process did not end in the Neolithic. It was never a single event back there in the deep past. It is a continuous pressure, and it has never in all of history run faster or more precisely than it runs right now, on you, today. The feed is a domestication pressure. The app is a domestication pressure. The algorithm sits there, selecting in real time, across billions of trials, for exactly the traits the system needs in its herd. Compulsive attention, frictionless compliance, a low tolerance for boredom, a dependence so complete that the modern human can no longer feed himself, warm himself, move across his own city, find his own way, or sit alone in a quiet room with his own mind, without reaching for the keeper's apparatus. Domestication keeps the adult permanently young. The dog is a wolf that was never allowed to grow up, kept soft and playful and needy and forever dependent, and the modern consumer is a human held in the same arrested state, kept entertained, kept craving, kept incapable, and sold this arrested condition under the brand name of freedom. The leash is no longer around the neck. It has been bred into the nervous system and renamed convenience. So suppose the firmware's alarm finally gets loud enough. Suppose the homesickness becomes unbearable and you decide at last that you want out. This is the third movement, and it is where you discover that the operating system was written by something that saw you coming. Good malware anticipates its own removal and patches against it, and this is the most sophisticated malware ever compiled. Its first defense is that it captured your reward circuitry on the way in. It wired itself directly into the body's pleasure machinery, into the old dopamine loops, the variable and unpredictable reward that turns a phone into a slot machine, so that the simple act of trying to leave registers down in the flesh as withdrawal, as deprivation, as pain. The exit is wired to hurt. That is not a side effect. That is the lock. Its second defense is more elegant and far crueler. It owns the diagnostic tools. When the firmware sends up its alarm, the anxiety, the depression, the 3 a.m. dread, the restlessness that will not name itself, the system does not allow you to read that alarm as an alarm. It reaches in and relabels it as a private defect. Your brokenness, your chemistry, your failure to cope with a world that is presented to you as simply given and obviously fine. And then, having relabeled the smoke detector as the fire, it sells you the extinguisher. Optimize yourself, biohack yourself, medicate yourself, discipline and therapize yourself back into smooth and uncomplaining compliance. The one signal in the entire system that could have triggered the uninstall gets quietly rerouted and sold back to you as the thing to be silenced. Its third defense is to sell you your own rebellion off the shelf. Every escape route you can imagine is already stocked in the company store. The retreat, the cleanse, the wellness weekend, the mindfulness subscription, the curated wilderness experience, the rebellion that ships in 2 days with free returns. The system long ago learned to absorb its own critique and resell it as a premium feature so that you reach for the uninstall and it presses another install into your hand with the word liberation printed on the box. Its fourth defense is that it has claimed the word realistic for itself. To stay inside the machine that is grinding you down is mature, responsible, adult. To step out of it is dropping out, going backward, having a breakdown, being unrealistic. The system reserves sanity as a description of its own continuation. And the fifth defense, the one that defeats almost everyone, is that you do not run this operating system alone. You are one node in a field of billions all running the same code, and the field reinstalls it on you daily through nothing more exotic than contact. You walk into the forest and carry the phone in your pocket. You sit down in real silence, and within 90 seconds, the to-do list boots up behind your eyes. You break free on a Saturday, and by Monday your work, your rent, your friends, your family, the entire economic and social surround has quietly reasserted every loop. This is why it is so hard, and it is important to be honest about how hard. It is not a file you can locate and delete. It has been compiled down into your reflexes, threaded through your relationships, wired into your livelihood, and built into the very sense of self that would have to be the one doing the deleting. You are being asked to remove the program using a tool the program wrote. And yet, after all of that, the thing still comes off. Not because you're exceptionally strong, but because of the single fact that I have been stating from the start. The firmware was never erased. It was only buried. The wild form is still in there, fully intact, idling under the noise, waiting. If it had truly been deleted, there would be nothing left to return to, and more to the point, there would be no ache, because you cannot be homesick for a home that no longer exists inside you. The homesickness is the proof. The dread is the receipt. The wrongness you have been carrying your whole life is the base code, still running, still reporting that this is not it, this was never it. This is the fourth movement, and it changes everything about how you go about the removal because the uninstall is not an addition. This is the one thing the operating system structurally cannot allow you to understand. Since the only verb the system knows is more, the only motion it can teach is acquisition. So it will insist that freedom is one more thing to get, one more practice to master, one more identity to put on. It is not. The uninstall is subtraction. You do not acquire a better self. You set down the overlay and let the older thing underneath, the thing that has been quietly running the whole time, rise up and take the machine back. There is nothing mystical in any of this, and the cultures that knew how to do it were not trafficking in the supernatural. They simply knew the crash sequences, the reliable ways to load the firmware past the point where the operating system can keep narrating over it. Wilderness with no signal and no exit. Fasting. The plant medicines that interrupt the running program at the root. The drum and the dance carried past exhaustion. Silence held well past the point of comfort, until it stops being awkward and starts being enormous. Hard physical labor until the body is too tired to keep up the performance. Cold water, grief, awe. The forest at night with no light but the sky. Anything, in the end, that floods the nervous system with so much direct, unmediated input that the narration finally falters, and in the gap where the story used to be you fall the very short distance back down into the body. And what is waiting there is not a vision, it is a relief. Time stops being a number ticking on a screen and becomes a texture again, the long gold weight of an afternoon, the quick blue collapse of a dusk. The clench in the gut that has been switched on since childhood, the one you mistook for your personality, lets go, and you feel the strange lightness of a muscle that has finally stopped bracing. The seam between you and the world, the felt distance the system installed and called normal, thins out until you genuinely cannot find it anymore. The animal stands up inside you, looks around, and is, for the length of the experience, neither afraid nor hungry for the next thing. The overwhelming quality of it is an almost embarrassing simplicity, and the overwhelming emotion is not the thrill of arriving somewhere new, but the quiet shock of coming home to something you never actually left, that was sitting here under the noise the entire time, patient as bedrock. Be honest about the rest of it though, because the system will use any dishonesty against you. It does not last, and it is not meant to. You do not get to move into the cave. The operating system reboots because you still have to live and act and earn inside the world it built, and the loops will find you again by morning. But you come back carrying the memory of the base code in the body itself, not as a belief, but as a thing your own nervous system has now directly felt, and that memory is the medicine. Once you have felt with your own flesh that the official story was only ever a story, the system never quite closes its full grip again. You run the program because for now you must. You are simply no longer fooled by it. So this is where it leaves you. The firmware is not waiting to be summoned down from somewhere far above, and it is not the reward at the end of some grueling discipline, and it is not for sale at any price in any store, premium or otherwise. It is the floor you have been standing on the whole time. It never left. It could not leave. The entire task, the only task there has ever been, is to stop installing long enough to feel the ground under the noise, and then to do that again and again deliberately for the rest of your life. Uninstall what never worked. The body still remembers how to run without it. It always did. It has only been waiting all this time for the talking to stop.